Hey, what's up? Where'd you go? All right, no more than 4 to a table. So somebody at this table probably. Come over here. All right, guys, welcome back. Good afternoon. We want to get started here. We got a lot to talk about today. If you remember, and I've got some reminders up here on the screen. We're finishing up the week with a couple different due dates, and journals are going to be due on Friday. You'll have 6 possible options, and if you are looking for full credit or a chance for it, you have to answer 4 of those. If you want easy extra credit, you're answering the other 2. I will give you the last of those journal prompts tomorrow. I'll be up there when you come in. Right. Now, tomorrow is going to be review day, and I'm going to send the study guide around now. I'm not going to really talk about it much. I may talk about it tomorrow, since that's the day set aside for it. But this is for the folks who are, those go-getters, or more than likely are those folks who know that they don't have a whole lot of time on their hands. They may want to get a head start on this. I think it's taking me on. It's taking me on. Yeah. Okay. There's 80s music just playing. I'll remind me to turn that off. So that test will be on Friday. I promise online review. We'll be doing that tomorrow night, and that will be at 9:15 through the Klein's Classroom Twitter handle. Hopefully that gives everybody enough time to get home from work, get home from practice, get home from games. If not, sorry. If I go too late, then I'm just going to fall asleep. 9:15 is pushing my bedtime anyway. But 9:15, that is when that will be. With that said, what we have today, last day for new stuff. We do have some notes today. You can either go paper and pencil on those, or you can use the key questions that I've got on the webpage. But it needs to be one or the other. So take a second, get yourself ready for those, and then we'll get started. You're taking a test. Turn off the
Oh, I can't. I'm so slow.
We got study guide. Tuesdays tonight. You're doing it tonight. Oh, paper or on the computer?
Riley has
Yo. What do you mean?
giant prison.
Oh, then I'm giving you the actual.
Not so much.
Well, it's worth noting that not everything is on that.
Make sure you're like.
Hey, you versus I.
And I can't see what's outside.
And then a note card?
I know, right? Just remember this. At some point, I'm going to need help. Remember this. Fine, open up one fine. Got my back here. So. All right, let's get started, please. Lie down, please. All right, I want to remind you, as far as notes go, I don't care how you're doing it, but I do expect there to be some effort here. Incredibly disrespectful to see people just kind of sitting around. And I can help you out. I do kind of tend to get rolling. If there's something that you missed, let me know. I can go back to it at the end of class. Heck, if we get in a pinch, I can always, post these notes. But make the effort. Make the effort. Follow along with it. Now, just a reminder, I've said this several times, that this first unit, first couple of weeks here, it's all been reviewed. And it's been a review of how we have gone from, just a land mass where there's a few Native Americans live, to 13 colonies, to 13 states. And that 13 states, that moment in 1776, when we boldly stand up and we wave a piece of paper at Great Britain and say, "We free." Right? That's the end point. I mean, we will be ready for that when we get through today's discussion. But we got to get there first. And I've said all along that I don't think we can understand how big of a deal that moment in July of '76 is unless we understand how we got there. That's what this unit has been all about. So we're going to kind of follow a process here. A point A all the way down to a point B. A roadmap, if you will, of how these folks living here in these 13 colonies, how they're going to go from, I got it kind of drawn up here on the board. Now they're going to go from British control, happy face emoji. There was a time when we didn't mind being British. We were proud to be British. We were fine bowing down to a king. It's all good. How did we go from that to considering ourselves Americans? Proud face emoji. How do we go from one to the other? That's what today's discussion is really all about. How do we go from considering ourselves British, considering ourselves American? We get started here, a quick reminder. Now we're going to pick the story up. Basically today's discussion is going to bridge, about 80 years. Pretty quick movement. We're going to start in 1688. We're going to end in 1763. 1688, a revolution. It's not ours. That's 1776. This is an English revolution. It's going on over on the island, over in Britain. And you see what they call it. Typically, a word that you wouldn't associate with a revolt is glorious. But that's the word they've chosen. It's also known at times as the bloodless revolution. The reason for that, quite simple. There wasn't any blood. Nobody lost their lives. No blood was spilt in this revolt. Not much of a revolt. But what happened here is that in 1688, Great Britain, and we know that it's ruled by kings. Talked about Henry VIII yesterday. But in 1688, we got a new king. His name's James. James II. Nobody likes poor James. Because James is Catholic. Remember, England really doesn't do Catholicism anymore. Ever since Henry VIII. Why did Henry VIII break away from the Catholic Church? Want to get a divorce. Pope said no. We said, all right, I'll build my own church. And yet, somehow, England has found itself under the rule of a Catholic. Nobody's really happy about it. So, a revolt breaks out. And large number of the British go to James II. Say, hey, Jim, you got two choices. You can step down, you can leave Great Britain, or we will arrest you and we will cut your head off. Now, James picks the first. Oh, I'm good. I'll take off. So no king, but at least he still has a head. So now Great Britain needs a new king, and the new guy is going to be a guy named William. He's married. The new Queen of England, Mary. It's worth noting that Mary might be one of the worst daughters in history. Her dad was James II. So James II's daughter was part of the group that said, leave or we cut your head off. Not a very nice thing to do to her dad, but that's what she does. Here's the thing to know about William and Mary. It's the only time I would even mention them. They begin using a certain policy that directly impacts the colony. And that policy is known as salutary neglect. I guarantee this is going to show up on the test. Probably going to be on the Unit 2 test too for that. It's a big deal. Now, when we see the or we hear the term neglect, we don't generally think of it as a positive thing. What does that mean? What is neglect? But I mean, it could be.
Like,
It doesn't have to be,
you're
but
leaving somebody and not doing someone else.
yeah. And it's kind of like you're like ignoring them. Now, could it be abuse? Yeah. I mean, if you're ignoring a child or something like that, or an animal, yeah. I mean, whatever, however you want to define it, we generally don't think of it as a positive thing. In this case, though, it absolutely is a positive, especially if you live over here in the 13 colonies. Happy face emoji. Because what William and Mary are basically saying is, y'all are really far away. I mean, you're over like a whole ocean. And there's no way we're ever going to be able to keep a complete eye on you. So I'll tell you what, as long as you don't make any trouble for us, you can kind of just do your own thing. We're just going to kind of ignore you. Now, we're not going to really do anything to take care of you much, but we're also not going to tell you what to do. Now, if you're a colonist, you'll love this, because this means you can build whatever government you want. This means you can make money however you want. This means you can worship however you want. You can do whatever you want, as long as you don't make trouble for Daddy Britain. Now, I love that metaphor of a parent dealing with a child. And I've got a couple of kids myself. I don't know that I would call myself like a super strict parent, but I have found that there are instances where if I let a certain behavior go on without saying something or doing something to stop it, it's only going to get worse. And then if I, at some point, try to get really strict, lay down the law, I sort of get met with some laughter. Like, now you're going to come down? I don't think so. Same thing here, guys. This is going to work, and everybody's going to be happy for this until Dad Britain decides to lay down the law. And all of a sudden, then you're going to have the kids saying, yeah, right, now you're going to lay down the law? No way. It really is the same situation. Keep that in mind as we move forward. Right? So the colonies now have a lot of freedom. Let's take a look at how they use that freedom. It's not a lot of positive. We have a difficult growing up process. A good example of that is slavery. Now, let's be real clear here. At no point is slavery ever a positive. Certainly not in U.S. history. Now, in 1688, when we picked up the story, it's not like slavery has just started. Slaves have been imported to the Americas for hundreds of years by this point. Remember, Christopher Columbus landed in what year? 1492, he sailed the ocean blue. Spanish begin to come over in large numbers, and they quickly find out, hey, not a whole lot of gold here. We can grow sugar. And that's going to make us a ton of money. So on almost every island in the Caribbean, you've got sugar plantations being built. Have you ever been down in the Caribbean? Seen a sugar? I mean, they still have these all over. To grow sugar, it's grown as a stalk. I mean, it looks like a bamboo stalk coming out of the ground. And you have to cut it with a machete or something like that. And then you have to press it. I mean, it's a really labor-intensive job. And so the Spanish, of course, they're not going to do that work. They enslave the Native Americans living on the islands. But they also give them smallpox and kill almost all of them. And I'm not exaggerating. By the time the Spanish are done, by the mid-1500s, there's roughly 90% of the native population dead, largely because of disease. So we still have sugar that needs to be farmed. Who's going to farm it? African slaves. There it begins, and it just kind of snowballs from there. So there are a lot of slaves in the colonies in 1688. But we're going to start to see a few things take place that really changes the way in which slaves are treated. It's not like they've ever been treated super well, You know, there were some areas where, slaves weren't guarded very well. There were a lot of escapes prior to Bacon's Rebellion. And there were some places where it was a practice that if you were a slave owner and you died, then your slaves were free. I mean, that's kind of how things ran. It was slavery was a thing. It just wasn't quite as strict as it was after Bacon's Rebellion. Now, we talked about this the other day. Anybody remember anything about Bacon's Rebellion? It was in the southern colonies. Can you tell me where it was? What colony it was in? I'll give you a hint. It was named after Elizabeth I. Virginia. So it's in Virginia. Do what? Yeah. No, throw it out there. Right. So it's in Virginia, and it's not necessarily a slave rebellion. You know, Nathaniel Bacon is an English colonist, and he's angry. The guy he's shouting at, pointing his finger in the picture, is the governor of Virginia. So it's English versus England. But if you'll remember, the reason why he's so mad. Remember the joke I said? Why is Bacon crispy towards the governor? It was a bad joke. It's still not funny, but sometimes that helps people. But the reason he was angry was because there had been a series of Native American attacks on Virginia villages. And instead of calling up the militia in Virginia, sending troops out to these Native Americans and dealing with them, the governor of Virginia has just sort of sat back and drank his brandy. But Bacon's mad about it. There's a lot of people that join him. A lot of people join Bacon because they feel the same anger he does. But there are others who join Bacon as well. Indentured servants and slaves. Let me ask you guys this, why might a slave run away from their plantation to join this rebellion? What do you think they might hope, at least, that they could get from this? What if Bacon wins? Maybe he'll give us freedom. Maybe. So yes, slaves are running off of plantations in big numbers. Indentured servants are joining up here as well. Now, what an indentured servant is, this would be like if Colt, maybe Colt lives over in Britain. He doesn't want to live there anymore. Colt wants to come to the colonies. The Colt's problem is you're poor. You can't afford to buy a place on a ship to come over. But maybe Colt finds out that John is in town. John Hatzel of the Boston Hatzels. John is a wealthy factory owner. Maybe he's a wealthy plantation owner down south of the Charleston Hatzels. I don't know. And so Colt might go to John and say, John, I really badly, I want to go over to the colonies, but I can't afford it. So can I make you a deal? If you will buy me a place on a ship, I'll come over, I'll work for it. I'll work on your plantation. I'll work in your factory. Best part is, you don't have to pay me. All right? I'm going to pay you back for this ticket over by giving you 3 years, maybe, of free work. But after that 3 years is up, Colt, you're free to do whatever you want to do. So John might say, that's a pretty good deal, yeah. So there you go. Oh, John says that. Sorry, Colt. But that's an indentured servant. All right, it's not slavery. It's just you're making a deal. After a couple of years, you're free to go. But indentured servants look at this same way. Now, maybe I don't want to work for 3 years for John Hatzell. Maybe I want to knock that down a little. Well, join up with this rebellion. Maybe we'll become free. Now, long story short, Bacon's rebellion fails miserably. Bacon is arrested along with several of his followers, and they're all executed. The real part of this, though, how it deals with slavery, is that once it's all done, a lot of these southern states, like Virginia, look at this situation and say, how did so many escaped slaves fight with this thing? What are we doing wrong that slaves feel like they can just up and leave our plantation whenever they want? No. We can't have this going on. The unfortunate result from this rebellion is that many of these southern states passed new laws, slave codes as they're called. And they're designed to really strengthen the control that plantation owners have over their slaves. Now, I don't know that it was ever good to be a slave, and it just wasn't. But here we see slaves, they're not people. The definition of a slave, it's not a person. It is pure property. The term that is often used at this point for a slave is chattel. That sounds an awful lot like what? Cattle. It's the French word for cattle. That's how slaves are made. They're just a piece of meat. They're just cattle. They're no better than a farm animal.
Pardon the interruption. At this time, any 7th grader who has not yet received a Chromebook, please come to the main office. Any 7th grader who has not received a Chromebook, come to the main office now.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, I mean, the slaves are now just pure property. And what does that mean? That means that they can be treated in every way, shape, or form as property. That means that they can be inherited. Now look at Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson, at the same time that he was writing all men are created equal in that Declaration of Independence, after he wrote it, he went back to Virginia, where he had slaves. When he died, those slaves went to his children. Some of the worst, just the most despairing things that you can read are letters that are written by people. Diary entries that have been written by people who witness slave auctions in the Deep South. And they talk about whole families being placed on that auction block. Wealthy southern plantation owners going up and saying, I'll buy the husband, I don't need the rest. Families being broken apart. And nobody cares. Because all they are property. They're just things. But it is a reality, especially in the South. I mean, look at this. This will tell you a great deal about just the raw numbers here. Colt, help me out up there, in case folks back here can't read it. These are the population numbers for the colonies in 1750. Colt, what's the total population approximately of the northern colonies? This would be Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and north. Now I'm talking total population of people. All right, so a little over 600,000. All right, Colt, of that 600,000, what percentage are slaves? So there are slaves up north. Only 5% of the population. Now, Colt, just approximate here. Add together the gold and the pink, which represents the South. Total population approximately. Together? It's 477 plus 77. It's all 560. No. So the gold and the pink, those represent, you're fine. Those represent the southern states, Maryland, South. So let's call it roughly 560,000 total living in those two areas. So then, Colt, I'll give you a chance to redeem yourself. Approximate percentages that are slaves. What are we looking at here? What's the percentage in the middle?
Pardon the interruption. At this time, any 8th grader who has not yet received a Chromebook, come to the main office now, please.
What do we got? Give me a number.
Who has not yet received a Chromebook.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Number. You took putting the two together? Yeah. That's a pretty good estimate. I mean, my math teacher told me that's pretty close to half. Half of the population, and even more than that, right, Colt, in the Deep South, what's that right there? 58% in the Deep South, that's more than half, are slaves. I mean, right here, guys, we're looking at the foundation of the Civil War. We're looking at how important slavery was to just the simple business of the South. That's what colonists are doing with their freedom. Something else that they're doing is they are continuing their deeply held religious beliefs. We talked about this yesterday, right? Pilgrims and Puritans. Of the two, Pilgrims and Puritans, which was the largest group in number, largest in influence? Yeah, Puritans. We know the Pilgrims the best, just because of the stories, but the Puritans are the real power. And I would say they're not just the power in Massachusetts. I mean, those leaders are really the power of New England for a long time. And if you remember, the Puritans have got some pretty deeply intense, very strict religious beliefs. And, it's going to cause some issues in New England. Right? We look at some of the reality. What's it like to live in New England? Early 1700s. Fear, I think, is the word. You've got the Puritans and their deep beliefs that cause a lot of fear. Because they've got a very strict definition of what is right, what is wrong. I think the feeling is that if we don't hit that definition, then we're in some real trouble. There's the very real fear of Native American attacks. It's more of a fear, it's more like an expectation. Very common were Native American attacks in New England. And so, you get a lot of people that were living on farms, just kind of out in the middle of nowhere. Not surprisingly, they start to move into towns because they think that there's safety in numbers. And those towns, of course, are run by Puritan leaders. And then when you add into all of that, the realities of what it was like to be a woman. Talk about U.S. history and women. It's not a real good story. Sorry, ladies. It takes us until 1920 to figure out that you guys could probably handle voting. I mean, the idea of what it was meant to be a woman is the role was pretty clear. You are supposed to be at home, you are supposed to be in the kitchen, or you are supposed to be taking care of the children. That's it. Nothing else beyond. The old saying, barefoot and pregnant. I didn't make that up. That was the expectation of a good woman. So what you've got here, you've got just a combination of things that are going to bring a lot of tension into this region. A lot of fear. Are we living the right life? Are we going to be killed by Native Americans? If I'm a woman, am I allowed to speak? I don't know. And this tension's going to boil up and eventually boil over in the form of these witch trials. 1691, it all starts in the home of a wealthy Salem merchant. He's got a couple of kids. He's got a young daughter. She wakes up screaming in the middle of the night.
At this time, we need all freshmen who have not yet received a Chromebook to the office now. All freshmen who have not yet received a Chromebook to the main office now. Thank you.
So she's waking up screaming in the middle of the night. She is claiming that someone, something, is pinching her while she's asleep. Right. Now that could have been anything. That could have been it could have been a bug. It could have been an older brother or older sister just trying to freak out little sister. I don't know. But no, it must be a witch. Must be a witch. And so they're trying to find who this witch is, and they land their gaze on the slave girl. She's got 2 strikes against her already. She's a slave, and she's a woman. And she happened to be a slave from the Caribbean, so they're thinking she's trying to do some voodoo stuff. She must be a witch. And this feeds this hysteria. Well, if she's a witch, is my slave a witch? Who else is a witch? Over the course of this year, 144 people are going to be accused of being a witch. 102 of them are women. 106. 106 are women. It's all said and done, 20 of them are going to be executed. Most of them by hanging. A couple of are burned at the stake. One of the 20 is actually executed by pressing, which involved the digging of a very shallow trench. They put the person lying down in the trench, and then they place a very large rock on top. Then let nature take its course. Literally takes you. It's bad jokes. You get it now? Yeah. But it's hysteria. I mean, it's sort of nuts that this is going on. But this is the time period. You're mixing religion with sort of this over-the-top hysteria. Feeding into that are some beliefs that are coming over from Europe. Now, over in Europe, they're having their own witchcraft crisis. They put together a guidebook for how to identify witches. Here are some of the drawings from it. The idea was that if you follow these guides, you'll be able to tell if so-and-so is a witch. And they used to have all sorts of creative ways to prove that so-and-so is a witch. One of them involved, an accused witch having her wrists tied together and her ankles tied together, and then she was thrown into the river. If she floats, she's a witch, and then she'll be executed. If she sinks to the bottom, she's not a witch. She's also drowned, but at least she's not a witch. It's nuts. It's nuts. So I'll tell you, the real impact of this, folks, of this hysteria, is that there are a lot of people in New England that look at what's going on in Salem over the course of that year, and this is over the top. And there's a lot of people that sort of step back from religion, put their focus elsewhere. I mean, I don't think we can undersell the overall impact of these witch trials. It really turns a lot of people off to religion, at least for a little while. Where are they going to put their focus then? Well, most of the folks in New England are going to do what the folks in the southern colonies and in the middle colonies have been doing for years. Not as much on religion, more emphasis on money.
Sophomores have not received a Chromebook. Please come to the office at this time. All sophomores have not received a Chromebook.
Are there
Please come to the office.
any of you that don't have your Chromebook yet? Now, here's where, we talked about this little process that I drew over here. How do we go from happy face to sad face? This is where things really change. And it always comes back to money. The reason why William and Mary and kings and queens after them could use something like salutary neglect was because they just didn't care about us. We were far away. We didn't really offer them much. And we're growing some crops, but there's not a whole lot of money over here. Obviously not gold and silver. We don't offer them. So it's easy to ignore it until we start making money. And what we see of the early part of the early 1700s is a huge jump in population. Take a look at it. You don't need to write those numbers. Just take a look at it. Look at Philadelphia. Over the course of 75 years, which is really not much, Philly's population is going to jump by 29,000 people. Boston's going to jump. Boston's going to double. New York is going to they're almost going to quadruple. These are huge jumps. What does that mean? That means there are a whole lot more babies getting made. That means there are a whole lot more mouths to feed. That means there are a whole lot more people needing jobs. If you're down south, that means there might be a whole lot more farms being opened. If you're up north, that might mean a whole lot more people working in factories. And with that being the case, there's a whole lot more money getting made.
At this time, all juniors who don't have a Chromebook, please come to the office. Juniors.
And so with that in mind, with this much more money getting made over here, all of a sudden Daddy Britton's saying, hey, you're starting to interest me. Now you offer something. So maybe I'm not going to ignore you so much. Guys, what happens here? Salutary neglect is over. New policy, mercantilism. Now, this was a term that some of those poor souls from AP World, we've heard this term. And I know it probably just jumped right to the front of your mind, right? Right, Ron? Just jumps right to the front of your mind. I probably don't even need to define it, right? Cole, can you handle that one? He's not that far up.
This time, all seniors, please go to the office who need a Chromebook. All seniors.
It's not necessarily taxes. Let me explain to you, give you sort of a insane example here. It's not really all that. What's going on here is this belief that a colony like Virginia, if you believe in this, then you believe that Virginia, North Carolina, New York, Massachusetts, whomever it is, a colony exists for one reason. Virginia exists for one reason. That is to make money. Daddy Britton, right here. Now that's a big change from, we're going to let you do whatever you want, we're going to ignore you. Now we're saying, just kidding, Virginia. I really care about you. I'm paying attention to you. And I want to remind you that you exist because England gave you the money to become a colony. If Britain had not created you, you wouldn't exist. And so you, Virginia, you, North Carolina, you, whoever, you need to remember that your only job is to make me. So how does that, I think it's easier to kind of have an example of why this is such a big deal. Why the colonists would be on their way to talking about revolution. England passes a law called the Navigation Act. You notice on your study guide there is a possible short answer question that asks you about the navigation. Here's what happened. I'm gonna pick on somebody else here. I'll pick on Lakin. Well, no, I'm gonna pick on you because you're kind of a farmer, right? Yeah. All right. So Lakin is a wealthy cotton plantation owner down the south. There you go. Lakin makes her money by growing cotton out in the field. Her slaves are going to go out and pick it for her. And so Lakin's going to have all this cotton laying around. And she's going to sell it to Riley, who lives up in Philadelphia. Riley owns a factory. Riley's going to buy this cotton from Lakin. So Lakin, you just made money. Good deal. So Riley in her factory is going to take that cotton. She's going to spin it. She's going to make it into a usable product. Maybe Riley, maybe you're going to use it to make shirts, blankets, whatever you want. So then Riley, what are you going to do with those shirts, blankets, and whatever? Just sell it. And Riley, you're going to make it. Good deal. So then Riley, you're going to take some of that money and you're going to do what? You're going to buy more cotton, right? And then you're going to take that cotton, you're going to make more stuff, and you're going to sell it. The moral of the story here is Lakin makes money, Riley makes money, everybody's happy. So what this law does is it changes things, and it completely screws over both of them. What this says is Great Britain would go to Laken and say, hey, Laken, when you get all this cotton, instead of selling it to Riley, you're going to put it on a ship. And that ship is going to come to Britain. And Laken, when you put that cotton on that ship, we might pay you for it. The key word is might. Oh, you are. Because if you don't, they're going to arrest you and put you in jail. All right? They're going to arrest you and put you in jail. So you're going to do it. And then that cotton is going to go over to Britain, where a British factory, not Riley's, is going to make it into shirts, blankets, and so forth. And then they're going to put it back on a ship and sail it back to here, where they're going to make Laken buy it back from them. So it is. Bingo. So Riley, you're completely screwed in this deal. You get nothing. Your factory's probably going to close and you're in big trouble. Right? Laken, you kind of get screwed over here too, right? They might buy the cotton. Yep. That's pretty bad.
Good afternoon. Please pardon the interruption for the afternoon announcements. Make tonight's supper a B-Dubs night. 15% of your total bill will be donated to the Frankton football team. So go out to Buffalo Wild Wings for dinner. Junior high students in action will have a call-out meeting tomorrow during homeroom in the cafeteria. SIA will have their first official meeting Thursday morning at 7:40 in Mr. Pruitt's room. White River cleanup information will be given out. Month money is due today. Also, New York City deposits are due Friday. The following need to come to the office.